I think what's really important here is we can't fix this state by state. If we're trying to fix it state by state, it's only going to get worse state by state until we get to the point that the entire map is completely frozen. And I think that, a lot of states have tried independent commissions. I don't think independent commissions get you all the way there. I think a more proportional map is really the kind of fix that, state by state across the entire country brings you to real fairness everywhere. Mm-hmm. And maybe in this moment of, maximal gerrymandering and this Armageddon, both parties can say, well, it's time to, stand down. And perhaps then standing down will look something like a more proportional impact in every state. Don Beyer and Jamie Raskin have a great bill called the Fair Representation Act. Larger multi-member districts use proportional ranked choice voting, and every state ends up looking pretty much like its politics. Every district is a swing district. Gosh, all of us could participate in a meaningful congressional election. I've never done that. I think that we are in what is a dark moment that's probably about to get darker as all of these states jump in. There will be consequences when Calais comes down. Many other states are probably likely to jump in. Some of the reforms that have been won in the last 10 years will probably be jeopardized. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to have to take a big look. Maybe once it's wreckage every place, people can say, okay, how are we going to put this back together again? There are solutions, but it's going to take a national solution that actually brings fairness.
And how do we get there? You mentioned the bipartisan legislation. Obviously, currently we have Republican House and Senate. And so I'm just going to handicap it and say it's probably not going to pass this term.
Probably not.
But I mean, one of the things that has always made redistricting reform so difficult is that you have entrenched interests. You have people with extreme self-interest, which is how we got to the point of trying to have these independent redistricting commissions to take the power out of their hands. So what's the plan to move forward? How can we see some real reform that clearly we need?
It's why we needed the courts to stand up for voters, because when it comes to redistricting, you can't always trust politicians. And listen, if Democrats are going to play constitutional hardball, I think they have to attach that to a real democracy agenda. They have to go to voters and they have to say, we're going to play constitutional hardball in the service of fixing this system that is so broken that it can be taken over really easily by authoritarians. And here's what we're going to do, and really spell it out. And I think that means a more proportional House. It means looking at apportionment of the U.S. Senate, which by 2035, not that long from now, we're going to have about 70% of the population in 15 states, which is essentially a blockade of the U.S. Senate. I think it involves looking at the Electoral College and how we elect the President of the United States. And it involves looking at this Supreme Court, which, no matter which side of the political fence you're on, I think we should all be able to agree that no 9 people in a democracy ought to have this kind of lifelong tenure to essentially be a super legislature and make these kinds of decisions with life tenure that are non-reviewable, and then they're able to time their retirements to be picked by a president of their choosing. It's deeply anti-democratic, deeply problematic. And Americans understand this. If you look at the support for things like term limits or real ethics code for the US Supreme Court, it's 75% of us. That's not a partisan question. So I think Democrats have got to attach constitutional hardball and a democracy agenda. And if they have a trifecta, in 2029, say this is what we're going to do in our first 100 days to restore things. I don't think it's uncommon that this kind of change is driven by one party. If you look at some of the big structural changes in American history, whether it's Reconstruction, whether it's the Civil Rights Movement, much of that was driven by one party. But Democrats are going to have to move fast because the structural reform window is going to close on them. Apportionment in 2030 is a big deal. The Senate map is very difficult. The apportionment in 2030 is going to change the Electoral College map. It's going to shift many more electors away from California and New York towards Texas and Florida. The map for Democrats in 2032 is going to be much different than the map in 24 and 28. They're going to have to find a way to win in more states if they want to win at the White House. So acting on behalf of actual majorities and convincing Americans that this is not partisan, but that it's in the service of true majority rule, I think is going to be really, really important, and they ought to get started now.